Ken, for introducing me, and thank you, Bob, for your very interesting and stimulating talk, which I am now going to disagree with. But it's very good to see all of you here, and it's been a very great meeting, and I do wish to thank Julio Montaner for all the work he's put into this, and especially for promoting TasP ahead of PreP. I'm going to just show one slide. So we have the one slide I'm going to show.
You may need to advance it.
Do I do it here? Okay, there we go. I'm only going to show you one slide. This actually is the whole talk. So I thought I'd just summarize the talk and put it on a slide, and then I'll talk you through the talk. At the International AIDS Society meeting in Durban in the year 2000, Nelson Mandela said, "It is never my custom to use words lightly. If 27 years in prison have done anything to us, it is to use the silence of solitude to make us understand how precious words are and how real speech is in its impact on the way people live and die. The words we say, the guidelines that we write, the advice that we give has a direct impact on people's lives, and we carry a very heavy duty." Now, I've been asked to oppose the motion that Bob proposed, that PreP is an essential component of TasP, but we need to be very clear as to what it is that is at issue. First of all, by saying that PreP is an essential component of TasP, we acknowledge that TasP has priority, and the matter at hand is the role of PreP as a component of TasP. Secondly, by saying that PreP is an essential component of TasP, we are implying that without PreP, TasP is unlikely to succeed in its goals and intentions. But in order to decide on the extent to which PreP is an essential component of TasP, we need to be clear about what it is that we hope to achieve through the use of treatment as prevention. My job is to convince you that while PreP may be a useful and even an important addition to TasP, it is by no means an essential component of the project. The only way we have to save the lives of the 2.2 million or the 22 million or so people currently infected with HIV, who are not already on treatment with antiretroviral drugs, is to make sure that they're able to start taking treatment well before they start developing life-threatening age-related infections. Indeed, if you want the best possible prognosis for individual people, they should clearly start treatment as soon as possible after they become infected. As public health practitioners, we therefore have a moral duty and an ethical obligation to ensure that as many people as possible are given the opportunity to know their HIV status and to have immediate access to treatment. Furthermore, the only way to stop the epidemic is to ensure that as many HIV-positive people as possible start treatment as soon as possible and comply with their treatment as far as possible. So the essential core of HIV control has to be the universal access to life-saving antiretroviral drugs for the immediate benefit of infected people, for the protection of their sexual or social partners, and for long-term public health and eventual elimination of the epidemic. Let me therefore restate the proposition and ask, for which people and under which conditions might PreP be an essential component of treatment as prevention? In doing this, we must remember that all problems in public health are problems of optimization, and the important and often difficult thing is to decide what it is that we want to optimize. Since people who are already infected with HIV should start treatment as soon as possible, PreP is clearly not an option for them. So if we want to compare PreP and TasP in relation to their effect on individual people, we're only concerned with those people who are found to be HIV negative when tested, and we can offer them two options. They can either continue to be tested regularly, and if and when they become infected, they can then start treatment, or they can start PreP immediately, and if and when they become infected in spite of PreP, they can then start treatment. What then do we have to optimize? And I would like to suggest that what we should try to do is to minimize the expected number of years that a particular person is likely to spend on treatment. Now, it is clear that if the incidence is very low, starting people on PreP will lead to many years of unnecessary treatment, and this will favor treatment as prevention. If the incidence is very high, people will become infected very quickly under TasP, but less quickly under PreP. Fewer people will be infected, and those that are not infected can stop taking their drugs when they are no longer at risk of infection, and this will favor TasP. In other words, we should favor PreP when the risk of infection is high and TasP when the risk of infection is low. The optimization question is, where is the break-even point? Above what level of risk should we favor PreP over TasP and vice versa? The calculation is not difficult to do, but we need to make some assumptions. For the sake of the argument, let us assume first that people are at high risk of infection for a period of, say, 10 years, that once infected, they will then live a normal life, and third, that PreP reduces the likelihood of being infected, as Bob has shown us, by about 60%. Then we can show that the break-even point occurs when the annual risk of infection is above 6% per year. Above 6% per year, PreP is favored. Below 6% a year, treatment as prevention is favored. Who then has a risk of infection that is greater than 6% per year? Well, KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa is one of the worst affected places in the world. And in the year 2000, the risk of infection exceeded 6% in women aged 15 to 37, which is a lot of women. But now, because the incidence has fallen as a result of treatment, as the studies in Schlabisa have shown us, the risk of infection only exceeds 6% per year, even in Schlabisa, in women aged about 20 to 25 years. And even for them, the difference between PreP and TasP would be marginal. For particular risk groups, the incidence of HIV may be higher, so that, for example, commercial sex workers in high prevalence settings may well be better off if they go on to PreP rather than wait for TasP. An HIV negative person in a discordant relationship may be at high risk if their positive partner is not on ART. I know a lot of women in South Africa that are certain that their husbands are not being faithful and have other sexual partners, but they feel unable to ask or even to discuss with their husbands the prospect of using condoms. And for women such as that, one would well recommend PreP. But these people are very few in number, and as treatment coverage increases, the incidence of HIV will fall, the number of people for whom PreP will be recommended will also fall. So we may regard PreP as a useful and even an important option for certain people at high risk, but this does not make it an essential component of the TasP project. We obviously need to consider the population level or public health benefits as well, and what we want to optimize here is the effectiveness, affordability, and cost effectiveness of TasP and PreP. We know that TasP can reduce incidence by 96%. If, for the sake of the discussion, we assume that people are tested once a year on average, let's assume that we can achieve 90% coverage. Under those conditions, the reduction of incidence under TasP would be about 82%. Enough to eliminate HIV in half of sub-Saharan Africa and to reduce it to very low levels in the other half. We know that PreP, indeed, as Bob has shown us, can reduce incidence by about 60%. In sub-Saharan Africa, the proportion of all infections that are in key populations at high risk is certainly less than 30%, maybe much less, and even in concentrated epidemics is likely to be less than about 50%. If we assume that half of all of these high-risk sexual encounters were covered by PreP, the overall reduction in incidence would be about 20% as compared to 80% under TasP, so that the impact of TasP on the incidence of HIV would be about 4 times greater than the incidence of PreP. Now, both TasP and PreP require a very large upfront investment, front-loading, but there must be at least as many people at risk of HIV infection as there are with HIV infection, so the initial investment under TasP and PreP is likely to be about the same, so that the issue of affordability does not favor either one. In the long term, of course, TasP would either lead to or come close to eliminating HIV, so that the cost would fall to zero or very close to zero. While under PreP, the prevalence might be reduced by about 75% in the long term, and the world would have to spend several $1 billion a day for the indefinite future treating those people who PreP does not protect. So in the long term, TasP is considerably, orders of magnitude, more cost effective than PreP, or if you prefer, has a much higher return on the initial investment. So I would like to suggest, therefore, that for a very relatively small number of individual people who are at especially high risk of infection, they might be advised to take PreP for as long as they are at risk of infection. From a public health point of view, TasP is much more effective than PreP and provides a very much better long-term investment. This does leave open the role for PreP as a useful addition to, but by no means an essential component of TasP, along with male circumcision, condom promotion, treatment of STIs, and behavior change programs. So I hope that you will support me in opposing this motion.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. And now